Okay, welcome everyone to our 2024 series of OTF Connect webinars. My name is Peter Beans, and I'm honored to be your moderator for today's session with Robert Ceccato entitled Celebrating the New ICD2O Digital Technology and Innovations in the Changing World Computer Studies course. Before we begin, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge first and foremost that we are gathered in the province of Ontario on the traditional territories of various Indigenous peoples who have been present on this land known as Turtle Island since time immemorial. We acknowledge that this has been a meeting ground for generations. We are grateful to the stewards and caretakers of this land. As advocates, teachers, and educators, we understand our collective responsibility to honor, protect, and sustain this land. We further recognize and honor within the membership of OTF those who are Indigenous to this land. This practice of recognizing the ancestral and traditional lands in which we work, live, and play is a concrete action that we undertake as a first step towards reconciliation between Canadians and the Indigenous peoples of this land. But it is not our only step. Collectively and individually, we must seek to denounce the injustices and wrongs that have been committed against the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and to dedicate ourselves to cultivating and maintaining relationships based on mutual respect and truth. So for today's OTF Connect webinar, we have Rob Ceccato. Rob is a dedicated computer studies educator with over 17 years of experience. He's an executive member of the Association for Computer Studies Educators, also known as ACE, and serves as the head of the Computer Studies Subject Council for the York Catholic District School Board. Rob played a pivotal role on the ICD2O curriculum rewrite team in 2022-23 and has contributed to the development of numerous resources, lessons, and documents for computer technology and computer studies courses. I've known Rob for probably all of those 17 years, and it's been a pleasure to know and work with him. And with that, I will turn it over to Rob.
All right. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Peter, for that warm welcome. And not sure if it's been a good thing if you've known me that long or not, but we're still friends, so we must be doing something right. As Peter mentioned, the slideshow that I'm going to be running tonight, there's the link there, and Peter, I'm sure we'll throw that into the chat window. So tonight we're going to take a look at the ICD2O course. And I'm going to do my best, and we're going to have some fun with this. But I think first thing we're going to do to have a little bit of fun, because it's all about following that three-part lesson plan, is we're going to do an icebreaker, so a live chat polling. So, and now Peter and I came up with this. What we're going to ask you to do is write the answer for the first question. So, are you here in the role of a teacher? So type in T, C, or other. Don't hit enter yet. Just get everybody to throw that in. And then I'll do like a 3, 2, 1. And then we're all going to hit the enter button. And it's going to cause this huge waterfall to come into the chat window. And so if everyone's had their chat window open, and make sure it's set to everyone. So are you here in the role of a teacher T, consultant C, or other? And in 3, 2, 1, hit enter. Oh, there it goes, just flying. Look at that. Oh, got a couple of C's, wonderful. Mostly T's, no surprise there. Awesome. Great. Beautiful. The message is still rolling in. Okay, so we're going to go now to our second question. Oops, sorry. Oh, page back. There we go. So what other computer courses are you teaching? So we're going to have you put in the course code. For that, once again, don't hit enter yet. We'll give you a second or two. What other computer courses are you teaching? Let's put those codes in. And then we'll have you hit enter in 3, 2, 1. Blast the chat. What do we got? Oh, look at this. Oh, robotics. ICS 3U, 4U. A couple people. Oh, BTA. Nice. I've taught that. ICS TEJ. Wonderful. All right, Marie. I like me to do a little bit of both hardware and software. Fabulous. Oh, Kevin's got everything. Kevin, I feel sorry for you if those are all in one class. You got like 6 courses. You poor guy. Oh man, fabulous. Good old Francis with the TIJ. He's doing the tech stuff. Great to see you, Francis. Okay, let's get into the last question. What other programming language are you using or would you use for this course? No right or wrong answers. So what programming language are you using or would you use for this course? The ICD2O. And we'll get you to type it in there. And of course, in 3, 2, 1, let's hit enter. There we go. Look at that Python. Did I see a scratch? I think I saw a scratch. Peter, I think you won the bet there. You said someone might do some scratch. Pinch a scratch.
I see some Linux going on. That's good.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, I used to do some command line stuff.
Yeah, I end up doing that in my senior engineering courses and senior comm sci courses. We do a little bit.
Al's doing some tkinter and Pygame 0, so we got some GUI stuff going on.
Absolutely. But it looks like most of you are doing Python, which is pretty much what I chose to do too. Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome. Well, listen, thank you everyone for that. Okay, so let's get going. So today we're going to be following a bit of an outline. So I'm going to look at some elements of the curriculum. We have a bit of a summary overview. We'll take a look at the strands, some considerations for programming and planning. We'll talk about everyone's favorite, assessment and evaluation. Everyone loves the A&E. And then at the very end, to try and keep you all to the bitter end, we have examples and some amazing teacher resources that have been done by ACE members. So that's going to be our plan. All right. So I do want to give a huge shout out to ACE. So ACSE is the Association for Computer Science Educators. This is a free to join volunteer-run nonprofit organization. We're basically teachers for teachers. We cater to computer science teachers, computer engineering teachers. We've actually started working with a lot of K-8 teachers, specifically with the new strands of science and technology where they started rolling in coding. And it's been an amazing, amazing group to be part of. We do have an annual conference. We do it in Toronto. So this year, our annual conference is on Saturday, April 27th. Hopefully we'll be able to see you there. One day, great event, so much great information. One of the other big things about ACE is our active mail list. We have over 600 members, and if I'm correct, Peter, I think we're the most active, or one of the most active in Google for the Google groups, I think.
I think so. I manage around 20 different mail lists, and for sure, of all of the ones that I cater to, yeah, it's the most active.
Absolutely. And so if you've ever had a question about, something, you can go to the ACE mail list there. The link is here. Join that up, and I'll tell you, it's not often you put up a question that you're not getting an answer within an hour or something, because there's so many of us on it and then it's very powerful. And then of course we have a website as well that we're using. Once again, it's not glittery and amazing. This is all volunteer run. We're always looking for volunteers, always looking for people to join us and be part of it. The event that's happening, the annual conference, is going to be happening at Seneca at the Newnham College in Toronto. And our focus this year is going to be computational thinking and coding. So if you have friends in elementary, definitely grade 9 math teachers, they can definitely plug into this and we'll be able to help them out. Okay. So elements of the curriculum. What we're going to do here, what I'm going to try and explain is sort of the vision of the curriculum from the ministry and the team that wrote it. I also am going to talk a little bit about my vision and how I sort of took what I did and how I brought it into my classroom, because we always know you know, things look great on paper, but when you have certain kids in front of you, there are certain things that you don't necessarily fit. I'm going to talk a bit about my experience because I taught it last semester. And then we'll look at some of the front matter stuff because I really think there was some important information, especially about digital world and the skills necessary for our students to be successful. So that's sort of our plan. So 3 visions of the curriculum. The first one is, how do digital technologies work? How are they used in society? Then this concept of computational thinking and enhanced programming skills, because we recognize the world is changing. And then a really big push on emerging technologies. And for those of you that were here at the beginning, we were talking about AI. It's there. ChatGPT is here to stay. I used it to help me do some of this presentation. It's wonderful, right? But it's also a great way for students to cheat and not learn. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and some of the experiences. Okay, so my vision of the curriculum, and some of you might not agree with me, ICD2O, not a programming course. Okay, this was not meant to be a hardcore ICS course. We realize that with the new science and technology K-8 curriculum, students should have been exposed to some CS and programming concepts. They're also seeing it in grade 9 and 10. So knowing this does make a challenge about, you know, how much programming do we put in here? However, when we really got into discussing this at the ministry level, a lot of us that were there were like, okay, coding's important, but what about these students that aren't your average coders that don't fit into that mix? We want this course to get people in. We want to get them exposed to it, to digital technologies, right? So don't get me wrong, fundamental concepts like input, output, variable use, loops, etc., important. Like, do you need to dive into lists? Do you need to go into GUI? No, you don't have to, right? The goal of the course was to show students that, hey, if you want to be an artist, or you want to be a lawyer, or you want to be a musician, right? How can CS, how can technology, and how will it affect your career? Right? It's not so much about building the applications. At least that was our idea. But how will the digital world and technologies help or hinder you in the future? ICD2O is for all students, right? Non-CS students, and this is something we really wanted to try and put into the curriculum, should feel welcome and engaged in the course. Yes, we love our gamers. We love our anime watchers that take the course. You know, we love those coding students. They're fabulous. But music, art, humanities students, right? They should feel that they should get some good value from taking this course. Now, I have to admit, this was a challenge for me because I'm a CS guy. I don't do humanities, definitely not an artist. You know, I've been teaching CS and CE for years, 15, 20, you know, years. It's crazy. So how do you work with a student that, you know, wants to study law or is really big into music? So this was a problem that I was trying to tackle, and I don't know how well I did, but, you know, I did realize having these students in my classroom, though, amazing. The diversity they bring, the intellectual richness that they bring, their points of view they bring were fabulous. So it was very refreshing to see that, right? Now, engaging students, all of them, not just the CS ones, was a bit of a challenge, right? And that's one thing I experienced. So what I emphasized when I was teaching the course was giving lots of different choices for assessment and evaluation, right? Your standard essay, standard presentation, you know, wonderful. But, you know, the artistic students want to do artwork. Music students want to put videos together, right? Comtech students want to put video together, infographics, skits. So I really relaxed the idea, especially when we did careers in CS. I was like, normally it's like, okay, it has to be a CS career. But if I had a student that was like, sir, I want to be a lawyer, I was like, okay, So how is digital technology affecting lawyering? How's that going to affect you? And so by doing that, a lot of these students were like, oh, wow, never really thought of that. If you wanted to be a pilot, what type of technology are you going to be exposed to? Obviously, they're going to train you on trainers or something. So that's sort of what I did. And I think it worked fairly well. And then, of course, another goal was to really get students thinking about, hey, how does this digital technology affect me? It's so prevalent in our lives, right? And it's not just in this course, right? We have art media courses that run at my school, right? Digital cameras as opposed to the old, cameras that we see. And just when you think about it, we have AI doing art now. AI is making its own music. So these are things people have to address and consider. So, having the students create an application that would be able to solve a problem in one of their courses, using track changes and Google Docs to help create study groups. Right? These are all ways of trying to introduce how technology can be used differently. And, some of the challenges of ChatGPT came up. So one of the articles that we came across was it takes 500 milliliters of water to only handle 10 queries of ChatGPT. So you think about how many queries people put into ChatGPT. Every 10 of them is your standard 500 milliliter bottle of water. That's what it costs in cooling. What does that do to the environment? You got like swimming pools, Olympic-sized swimming pools being used to cool and run the equipment. And then, of course, ICD2O is not a programming course. I'm going back to that, and I just wanted to bring that in. So Peter did an amazing job putting together some pictures because I'm not an artistic person. And so here you can see that there's lots of different concepts around digital literacy and STEM, right? There's this big push for STEM. And, even at the beginning of the meeting tonight, we were talking about, how do we get more tech teachers in from industry to become teachers? Because you really need an electrician to do a proper electrician's course. So you can see here, we got a whole bunch of stuff being intertwined with STEM education. We're going to talk about transferable skills. We've got a little bit of computer programming in there, but the global economy. Look at what innovations are doing for us, right? What type of contributions are people making? And it's everybody that can do this. And then we're looking at how society is changing with wearable technologies, diabetes nowadays, people just have a sensor they wear, right? And if something goes wrong, it gets sent to their doctor automatically. That's pretty amazing. That's digital technology, right? So how do we handle digital technology, right? How do they work? How are they used in society? So I got 6 points here that I'm going to talk a little bit about. And really the idea was, how do we encourage our students to explore the digital technology? In other words, how do we show them these social and societal implications, right? How can we have them understand the deeper understanding and the role that these technologies play? So going back to those first three overarching ideas, visions of the curriculum. One thing I did was I looked at reverse engineering, right? Having students explore how digital technologies work by taking them apart, putting them back together again. So I'm a computer engineering teacher. I have lots of old computers in my lab, lots of old bits of technology, old Xboxes, Wi-Fi routers. So we were lucky. We would learn a little bit about the computer hardware and then rip the stuff apart, get our hands dirty, get in there. Look at how things are, wired and configured, right? Give them that understanding. So students love this. They love the hands-on stuff, right? They get to tinker, they get to explore, and they even break things, but it's okay. It's old stuff. They're allowed to break it, right? And they can feel comfortable in there, not worried that, well, if I do something wrong, So this really worked out well. Students love the hands-on part. Later on in the course, we looked at code, and then we'd start to, so what does this code do before we would run it? Doing that reverse engineering, thinking through it, proper variable names, showing what things are. So it allowed me to emphasize really how important comments were in computer programming, how formatting mattered, right? Having a properly formatted program, the students were able to reverse engineer what the program did because they could see it. It was clearly laid out. These are all important skills when we go off into industry. I also did a lot of internet research. So I'd give out assignments, questions on specific topics that students would need to research and present in class, as well as specific digital technologies, their applications in society. I'd ask students to think, how could they change this sort of technology? Or what would they change in their lives in terms of technology? What would be a better phone? What would be a better set of headphones? Right? Have them think, when I walk into a building and the doors automatically open, how's that happening? Am I being counted? Why would they, hear a beeping sound when they walk into a building? So just ideas like this, having them look at concepts. And what did it do? Reinforced critical thinking, right? Some students had that aha moment. So this encouraged them to investigate benefits, challenges, ethical implications of technologies. Right? I talked a bit about the AI. Yes, it's wonderful, but huge costs to our environmental aspect, right? Field trips, if you can swing them, are great. I was very lucky. The ministry put on what was called a level up field trip. It was for skilled trades. It was the Ministry of Ed and the Ministry of Labor. Was an amazing event. Everything was paid for. I took a busload. I took my grade 10 ICD students. I took my grade 11 engineering students, and it was awesome. Kids got there, they had bricklaying set up, they had welding set up, they had kids that could drive stuff virtually. So and it was just great. The students all got there, they were trying, they were learning, they were seeing how technology is being used. And, if you can do field trips or getting guest speakers, it's definitely a good way to get students encouraged. We would do some media analysis as well. So we would look at different types of media representations in digital technology. So YouTube videos, advertisements, and then we would critically examine them, right? We have this fakes, right? There's lots of deep fakes going on around there, around the world, right? How do we recognize it? What is good information? When we look at something and it's like, do we believe it? How do we know if we should believe it or not? Right? So fake news concepts, one-sided events, how media controls people, how TikTok and other apps influence what you see and how you perceive things. There's all algorithms behind this so that they can make their money. We also looked at fake versus real, like I said. And really, it helps students understand just the type of influence that these technologies can have on their views of the world and of digital technologies. We did several ethical debates. So take a topic like, who's controlling what you see in TikTok? And then discuss, how's this algorithm being figured out? Why are people paying for stuff? What's the idea behind clickbait? Right? And then we're like, how should it really work? What should I really want to see when I'm clicking on something? So once again, just trying to get kids to think critically and go a little bit deeper about, wow, there's a lot of stuff here that's in the hands of other people. We also looked at, you take something like Rotten Tomatoes, right? They'll say that a movie is absolutely horrible, and then the people who go see it will love it. And it's like, so how does one score get 30 and then the people score get 99? Like, how's there this disconnect between them? So once again, algorithms, technology. And then of course, the current news events, news analysis, there's so much going on in technology with new equipment, new ideas, new concepts, new challenges. So, we fed this topics, it fed into so many of the different aspects. Like you could take something and reverse engineer how it was working. So I have to admit, it was great. This could be a little bit scary sometimes with the news events because, what's appropriate, what's not. So for those of you that are going to engage in this, just a little bit of a precursor, don't do it on the fly. A student brings in an article and they just throw it up. It's like, okay, Timmy, share for us. And then you're like, wow. So, but all in all, I found some of these ways were just great to help students explore and figure things out. So going back to our three main points, we'll take a look at the second one. So how do we develop computational skills and enhance programming skills? Hey, but Rob, I thought you said this wasn't a programming course. It's like, I know, but it's still a good chunk of it. And these kids are coming to us with, some programming skills, or at least they should be. So what did I always do? I love algorithms. I love algorithmic thinking. I love teaching students how to create algorithms, how to use them, right? Show students how to solve a problem using a step-by-step set of instructions. You can do a recipe, bake something in class, make something, right? This is all algorithmic thinking. And, their daily routine, just explaining to them, when you get up in the morning, you follow a certain set of steps. That's an algorithm. There's not much different between that and solving a computer program. So this course, of course, led us to breaking down complicated problems, right? How do we do that? Take a big problem, break it into smaller, more manageable tasks, keep working through that. That's all part of the algorithmic design. And it was great because that all fed into the whole computational thinking, which is a huge part of the course. Project-based learning made a lot of sense. And for those of us who teach CS, that tends to be the case, right? Lots of options to do hands-on programming projects. You can have students program on their own. You can have students program in groups. You can give them code and then have them edit it, modify it, add on to it. Right? Once again, just having them work together, encourage that diversity, encourage that shared learning, and it's great because with the different mix of students, you get a different perspective from having an art student come in or a music student come in and work with the groups. So I know a lot of my students really enjoyed this when we did some of this. Of course, we have to emphasize debugging, troubleshooting. Now, any programmer or developer understands and realizes debugging is a part of everything we do. It's an essential skill in programming. So teachers, when we teach programming, it's natural that debugging is part of the process, right? So using and encouraging debugging tools, reading error messages, trying to figure out what they are. And then if we don't, good old Google it, right? Or use ChatGPT to show you what you did wrong. It's all great ways for students to learn how to analyze, how to use those debugging tools, and how to troubleshoot. And then one of the last things which I really liked to do was using challenges and puzzles. So by exposing and presenting coding challenges, logic puzzles, this requires the students to think critically. They apply their programming skills as well. There's lots of platforms for coding competitions. If you're on the ACE mail list, you'll see that there was a whole bunch of them that people were talking about, and there's always new ones being done. You always have CEMC Waterloo doing their programming contests, both the Beaver as well as the other ones. And these challenges are great for those kids that really want to do the coding. But what about the non-coders? So, puzzle-based stuff, Sudoku, I would throw a lot of, just random problem solving skills or stories that would come up. Ditloids was something that I always used. And so a ditloid is basically a picture. So you might have the word like, oh my goodness, I have an example here. Oh, thinking outside of the box. So you have a picture of a box, and then you have the word thinking, which is beside the box outside of it. And you say to the students, what do you think this means? And of course, they look at it like the word thinking is outside of the box. Oh, thinking outside of the box. And so that's what ditloids are. And the kids love them. Mind over matter. So you have the word mind, you have a division sign, you have matter underneath it. Little things like this. And it's great for them because it engages different parts of their brain. They get excited. And of course, it encourages the students to explore, experiment, and challenge themselves to grow as programmers, right? Which is going to help them with their computational thinking and programming skills. So those challenges were great and they worked out well. So getting back to the third aspect of the visions of the curriculum, investigating the impact of emerging technologies. And so this was a really big push. First thing you have to do is sort of introduce the concept. Explain by what emerging technologies are. What does it mean? Why are they important to study? This led to lots of different class discussions, how these technologies can be used, how they're used for good, how they're used for bad, right? How they affect society. And these are technologies the kids are using. So they're relevant. Another thing we did was providing examples, right? Give students real life examples of emerging technologies. So artificial intelligence, virtual reality, blockchain, right? Renewable energy. These are all examples of emerging technologies. How are things being used differently? Many students have heard these terms before, so they know what they are, or they think they know what they are. Of course, they're buzzwords, so students are intrigued and interested in them. And many students are already using or are early adapters of these technologies, right? So you can show and explain how these technologies are already being used. And how are they going to impact the future? Will people in the future need to get a driver's license? Or will we have driverless cars? Not in Canada right now, right? Then, of course, research and analysis, which is always an important aspect. So conducting research on emerging technologies, showing students how to use ChatGPT properly. Peter and I alluded to this, right? It might not be so much as the final answer anymore, but how did you get to the final answer? What type of questions would you be asking in order to get what you want? How do you refine your queries so that you get the information that you need? And then, of course, have the students document the process. What did they go through? What happened when they changed the word from one word to another? So that was, an eye-opener for a lot of students. They can see their responses, how to refine them in order to get the solution they want. And then, of course, using reliable resources, or sources, scientific journals, industry reports, reputable news outlets, researching these things and using them are all part of something they'll have to do in the future if they go on into CS possibly. And then, of course, it always leads to what are the benefits? What disadvantages do we have? What's going on with that? Case studies, group presentations, and debates always work well, especially with emerging technologies. Students are like, yeah, we love ChatGPT. It lets us cheat. It's like, okay, but what happens when you really need to do something? It's like, right. So you have these discussions. We look at the emerging technology. Is it great that everyone's constantly wired to their cell phones? That it's going off constantly. and how that's affecting our brain patterns. So all of these things are ideas that you can look at. I've often talked to students about drones. Lots of people have drones nowadays. And it's like, okay, they're wonderful until they're used for the wrong purpose. Or even better, how are they used differently? Like, how are drones used in agriculture? So there's been huge research done where, farmers will actually fly drones over their agricultural fields. They'll do a thermal sensor and they'll see what areas are stressed, what needs more water, what needs more, fertilizer. And then they don't have to spray all of their land, they can target it. So all great ways of how emerging technology is being used in different aspects. 3D printing, it's just revolutionizing the manufacturing process. Space station, they don't have to bring everything up there anymore. They can print what they need. And then, of course, you can get into group discussions with this, like I said, debates and presentations. You really do need to talk about the ethical considerations, though, right? So it's a very important part of the curriculum. We have to make sure that students understand that, in most of these digital technologies, emerging technologies, there is good and there's bad, right? The internet is wonderful for a lot of things, but there's also a lot of scary things on it as well. So we have to teach our students to recognize that, to help them become, good people. I teach at a Catholic school, so there's a lot of morality aspects that we talk about as well.
Rob, we had a question come up about case study resources. Can you recommend any locations where you can look up case studies?
At the end of so at the end, Peter, when we have that one that the ACE members put together, I think there's a couple links in there. I don't have any off the top of my head, so we should be able to plug into that and see them. So just, sorry about that, not being able to bring something off the fly. Okay. So I wanted to talk about transferable skills. So this isn't in the curriculum, but it's in the front matter. And in order for students to be ready for the future, especially for STEM-based careers, the idea of transferable skills, I think, has to be addressed and considered by those of us who are teaching STEM courses. These different transferable skills and how important they are for future students, as well as for our students currently, and how to master them, really is going to put them at a serious advantage in the future. And so we have critical thinking, problem solving, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, self-directed learning, collaboration, communication, global citizenship and sustainability, and digital literacy. Wonderful skills. And when we look at them, a lot of them do make sense. So the critical thinking and problem solving. This basically, I would have students learn how to problem solve as well as how to implement solutions. Students are gathering information from different areas. They're analyzing that information, pulling out the good stuff, right? So how do they learn to pull out the good stuff? How do they evaluate if data is good? Well, one tool I used, and we're going to have this in there, was it was called How to Recognize False Content Online, the New 5 W's. And so it was a mediasmart.ca website, and they had this great tip fact sheet that I used, and it really gave students strategies and hints to look for when they're given information or when they're researching information. And so you could send students on a fact-finding mission. They would find something online, and what I said is pick something that's weird or unique. Just do a Google search for something weird and unique. And then, when it comes up, is it fact or is it fiction? And so then they would use this MediaSmart tool, the tip sheet, to go through it and actually assess it, right? Is this true or false? Is this real or fake? And it's great because it enhances critical thinking, problem solving, researching, and then it also gives students that sense of what's good, what isn't. And the students really enjoyed this. They had a really good time with this assignment because it gave them the freedom to pick what they wanted. And then some of them were like, oh yeah, this seems really, really fake. And then they're like, oh wow, it's actually true. And then vice versa. Um, so that was great for them. And then problem solving, we looked at our standard problem solving models. So, analyzing, problem definition, brainstorming, prioritizing, you're implementing and testing. And what I did with this is I always choose a silly topic like, why doesn't Mr. Ceccato have hair? And so let's define the problem. Let's analyze it, right? So why doesn't he have hair? What could it be? We brainstorm it. And I always choose something funny, something silly. And the kids love it. Because, we come up with craziest stuff like, oh, when Mr. Ceccato was doing his computer science degree, he sat in front of 25-inch monitors. They were all CRT, and he would bask in the radiational glow, and that's why he has no hair now. And the kids are like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And just funny stuff like that. But the whole entire idea is like, okay, identify your problem, right? Let's analyze it. What could be some possible ideas, brainstorm them, then let's look at them. Which ones make sense? How would we prioritize? And just going through this process with the kids was great, because we do this with computer science. But then I would say to students like, okay, why didn't you make the team? I don't know, sir. I said, well, let's use this problem solving strategy and come up with it. And we would look at it, and students could actually apply this to other parts of their learning, other parts of their lives, which was great, I thought, at least. Innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. This all follows up with critical thinking and problem solving. Of course, it would lead to this next topic. So now that students have a problem, is there some way to innovate it? Could we come up with something to solve it? Maybe a tool, maybe a piece of software, maybe it's a strategy, right? Now, I would have loved if we would have come up with something and then been able to roll it out into like a business, concept and get onto Dragon's Den or whatnot. That didn't happen, but that might happen in the future, right? Where once again, you just innovate, come up with something creative, and we see lots of these events happening as well. So collaboration, self-directed learning, often the people are engaged in class, students are working together on projects, do a lot of think, pair, share, and then recognizing when you're working in a group, you have to do your job, right? You have to do your part. And so that's that self-directed learning, being accountable to your team, being accountable to yourself, being accountable to your courses so you can be successful. And so the collaboration worked very well. Students like to work in groups, especially after the COVID thing when everyone was isolated. And once again, just having that diversity of different students, different backgrounds, different courses, was fabulous. So when I did make the group, so as a teacher note, I would often pick students that normally wouldn't form a group together. So how you let them make their own groups and they always pick their friends. So, like do an alphabetical list, jumble it up so that, they don't always have their buddies in their groups. And it was a little, uncomfortable for the first 2 or 3 times, or actually the first 1 or 2 times. But after that, people are like, wow, this person that I would never talk to, that's not in my circle of friends, is really cool. And that was great. And I found that happened. And once again, that mix of diversity, that inclusivity, bringing all that in was awesome. The students really enjoyed that. And it was nice to see, right? New friendships evolving. In terms of communication, lots of ways for students to communicate effectively, right? How do we teach them to communicate effectively? If you can do it with 200 words instead of 1,000, why not? And just types of communication. It doesn't have to all be written, right? You have artistic students, they can show with art, they can communicate with art, they can communicate with music, with drama. Once again, PowerPoints, videos, like these students are so savvy and they're so excitable. Like they will spend hours putting a video together. I had them do like a newsreel, right? Where they had to be a news anchor. And some people actually like had like the background of a newsroom with the trailers running along the bottom and stuff. That just, it was great for students to be able to do that and share that, right? And then you have the one student that's like, yeah, I'm just going to do PowerPoint, right? And that's fine too. So global citizenship and sustainability, I struggled with. I'm going to be honest. And as I continue to teach and reflect on, the how I taught the course, I'm really hoping that I can do a better job on it. It was just one of those challenges where it was like, how do I deal with this? And so the one thing I did, and maybe you could disagree with me, maybe it wasn't necessarily the best thing, was I actually went online and Cisco Systems has some amazing resources. They have a website called Skills for All. So skillsforall.ca. And it's a wonderful website. And actually, I had the students do a cybersecurity module. And, it talks a bit about the global aspect. It came in from like how this is a problem globally. How do we address it? Because, Cisco Systems, they had paid people to do it. And the students actually really enjoyed it. The modality of teaching was, once again, global in scope because they were looking at stuff. Cisco, of course, like I said, did a better job than I could. They had much better use of, diversity worldviews and perspectives to address the concept and the ideas. And it's free. So that's always great. There's no red, green, or yellow that you have to worry about for it. The site, to use the site, they have to put in, I think, their country and the year they were born. It doesn't ask for anything else. And, lots of free online modules that they could take. And at the end of it, once they did complete the actual cybersecurity module, they all got a certificate or they got a badge, which they could then put into a portfolio or they could put into the resume, which was cool. So something definitely to think about. And that was skillsforall, one word, .com, sorry, not .ca. They were great. So I definitely turn that out to people who want to use it. And then for digital literacy, what's the definition? Well, the ability to solve problems using technology in a safe, legal, and ethically responsible manner. Once again, if you're using critical thinking skills and then take a look from a technological slant, how's ChatGPT being used by students? How's it being used by teachers? How's it being used by industry? Right? Are there better ways of using it? What's the benefit of ChatGPT? I'll tell you, as a teacher, when I'm asked to do a reference letter, like, oh my God, it's beautiful. Right? When I have to summarize something, it's beautiful. Right? It does such a better job than I could. Right? But once again, is that cheating? Is it not cheating? This is sort of where the ethical side of things can come into it. So, yes, you could use ChatGPT to write your program and you could get a perfect mark on it. So you could cheat using ChatGPT, and we talked to students about this, but does it really teach you how to program? Right? How about the challenge and the struggle that comes from programming? Right? There's value in struggling, right? It's how we learn. And then when we get that taste of success, then I talk to students about that, right? This is it. Taking the easy way out is not always the best way. And then, of course, because like I said, I'm at a Catholic school where I'm always reflecting on gospel values and Jesus and how that plays a huge role in things. Now, there are great ways to use ChatGPT. For example, you've got to study for a math test, have it generate you math questions to practice. Have it give you, tutoring questions. Have it give you a cheat sheet that you could use. Right? These are all things that it can do. Then you can use those tools to help you understand better. If you have a question you don't understand, you can put it in there. Right? Look how the solution worked. Right? So these are all fabulous ways of using and just accepting the digital literacy side of things. So that's some of the ways that I did it. So my goals And that's sort of my goals were like, okay, how can the students gain an understanding of digital technologies, perspectives, insights related to social, cultural, economic, environmental, and ethical issues, right? That's what I wanted them to do, right? So we looked at things, we explored, we learned together. Developing computational skills help them to learn a solid foundation in programming, right? We know that computational skills are they tie in very closely to programming and problem solving, right? So that students can become early adapters of technology, understand how it's created. I also believe that if the students can embrace some of these lifelong learning skills and insights, they're going to be prepared for the future, be prepared for digital technology and innovations, and that's going to make them successful. So for number 3, making connections, technology is a part of their lives. Look at this tool, the cell phone, for example. How useful is it? When I get students that have to bring me forms back, it's like, everyone take out their cell phone. Everyone, set a reminder in your phone for the time when you think your parents are going to be home. I'm like, really? It's like, yes, you have that tool. Use it. It's wonderful, right? And they don't think of using it in that way. But that's a really good way to say, hey, here's this technical device and you can use it to make things easier for you. Now, of course, with the benefit of the cell phone comes the fact of, well, how about being plugged in all the time? What's this doing to our brains? What's this doing for addiction? How's this affecting our dopamine levels? We know with the dinging and the constant ringing, how's this affecting? So we have to talk about those because, these students have grown up in a world that's very different than where I grew up. Technology is just there all the time. So, try to help them understand the technology, its influence, its positive and negative aspect, how it's used in society, how it can be used in the community, how it's not necessarily being used. You talk about digital surveillance, right? These are all things that are being used. Is it going to be good if, we're constantly tracked and we don't really have freedom anymore? And then encouraging students to pursue further studies in comp eng, comp sci, even into the trades. We all want our students to be successful, and there's so many great fields of study in engineering, computer science, and even in the trades, right? And this idea that people shouldn't do the trades is crazy. Tradespeople make more money than most people. It's crazy what they make. And you know what? It's a great job to get into, a great vocation. And so talk about it, encourage them. That level up field trip that I took the students to, it was great. I had students laying brick. They were, dropping brick and cement down. They're like, oh, this isn't half bad. It's like, yeah, wait till you're trying to do it outside in -20. Like, but once again, just that aspect of like, hey, it's not just programming in CS and CE. And then, of course, at the end of the day, I really want students to have fun. I want them to take something away from the course. We're all in electives where students, vote with their feet. And if they're not liking my course, if they're not getting something from my course, I'm not going to see them again. And that's a huge disservice to them and to me, because this computer technology stuff, the digital technology, it's not going away. It's not going away. So get the students in there, have them have fun, do silly things with them, and away you go. That's what I did. Okay, good old computer science prerequisite sheet. Here you can see nothing's really changed. They changed the title for the old ICD2O. So I just put this in as a reference for you to look at. No changes to the prereqs, of course. The course is still open, and that's fabulous. So really nothing new there. So let's start taking a look at some comparisons. So ICD2O, by the way, this was courtesy of Claude AI, Claude.ai, put it in. It's like, hey, give me a comparison. So the old course was introductory, provided a broad overview of computer concepts, simple programming, social impacts. What does the new one look at? Specific focus on digital technology, programming, and innovation. Huge emphasis on critical thinking, developing those programming skills. Why? Because students have them, right? They should have seen computer programming in kindergarten, grade 8 up to K-8. So, we should be able to harness those skills and build on them. It's not necessarily introductory anymore. And of course, the whole aspect of emerging technologies, because they're just constantly happening. So, as you can see here, I think the AI did a pretty good job comparing the two. What do you guys think? You think the AI did an all right job? A thumbs up or a thumbs down? What do you think? Made my life easier, I have to admit. So what about the strands? How did they change? Well, here we have 3 main strands, so that really hasn't changed. And of course, if you take a look at the new strands, the shift in focus from understanding computers to computational thinking. And for those of you who are sort of wondering why this came about, it all had to do with the fact that we use computers in a multitude of different ways than how we used to use them. And so, understanding computers was great, but recognizing that these connections and all the different ways of using them and how software and hardware is innovated, like, it's crazy. So, we have like cell phones, smart devices, right? These are all things that, ICD2O wanted to talk about and give teachers the opportunity to explore them if they wanted to. So it's not so much as just understanding how the technology worked, hardware, etc. It's like, wow, look at these new devices. How can they be used? So we were moving away from that understanding how computers work and moving towards thinking more like a computer, how to stay networked, how connected these are with our lives, with our friends, with society. And then, there was this push towards this new train of thought of computational thinking, making these connections and recognizing these things. And of course, the fast pace of change in technological innovation and shifts in society, we just had to, get into that. And so that was sort of the focus of the strands when we were looking at them and discussing them. So if we take a look at programming, so we'll dive in a little bit deeper here. So personally, I believe that the ICD2O should not be a full-out programming course. That's what ICS 3U, 3C, 3M, if it even exists, should be. Now, programming is still a very important part of the curriculum. And you can use programming to help students hone their computational and critical thinking skills. Not to mention, programming really is problem solving using a computer, which does help students work on those transferable skills we looked at. And of course, all of that's going to help them prepare themselves for the future. And I know I said this before, but with the introduction of programming strands in the K-8 science and tech streams, which by the way, ACE had a hand in developing. So there was a whole bunch of us from ACE that actually helped roll out and work on those. And of course, with the introduction of coding in the math curriculum, right? Coding is the new language, right? Everyone's going to have to learn it. I believe there's going to be exposure to it in some way, shape, or form. Even when you think about the queries that we use and how we word things into ChatGPT, very similar to the old SQL commands and queries that we did in databases. So in terms of emerging technology, there wasn't a lot of that in the ICS2O. It was more social impacts, environmental side of things. We did talk a little bit about some of those aspects. However, now emerging technologies is a major focus. AI, You know, technology's everywhere. Our personal computing devices, cell phones, IoT, wearable technology, the integration of technology into everything, your fridge, your car, your stove, your thermostat, right? These are all things that can be controlled digitally. Bluetooth, you know, light bulbs, and, you know, opening your door and closing your door using, you know, Bluetooth and whatnot. It's just, there's so much to think about what goes on in your car nowadays, right? You don't plug your MP3 player in anymore. I'm dating myself here, right? Your Bluetooth automatically connects, goes to your playlist, and away you go. So as a writing team, we felt that we really had this you know, influx of technology had to be addressed, especially with the use of AI, automation, and how reliant we are on this technology. Like, think about it, when we had the Rogers blackout, you know, people's cell phones weren't working, they couldn't call 911. Like, wow, you know, the government was like, oh, we got a problem here, right? And then we have to think about biases that exist in these new systems, right? So what we did was we really wanted to give teachers the room to explore and bring these relevant topics to their classroom that matters. Because let's face it, what I teach down in York region could be very different than what's important up in North Bay, right? Or up on, you know, far north, right? Far south. So we really wanted to say to teachers, hey, listen, whatever is affecting your society, your community, you know, be able to really bring that in and get that relationship with the students so they can see it. And so that was one of the reasons why there was such a big push on emerging technologies, and the freedom behind being able to choose what you wanted. Careers and application. I feel that this one, there was really no changes between the two. You know, yes, there was definitely your ICS2O. There was this push towards university and college. Now with the ICD2O, you know, it's not just, you know, university, college, it's STEM and skill trades, right? We realize that this is everywhere, you know, and it's just, why not? So that was the big value here. But other than that, I didn't really see much of a change between them. So I apologize for the slide being so wordy. I can blame ChatGPT for this one. So the whole emphasis, and so this sort of came from the front matter of the curriculums when I sort of put them together. So, you know, you can read them, and I'll leave it up there for a second or two for you to go through. But I basically summarized the old ICS2O. We prepared the kids for post-secondary jobs. That was the emphasis. Programming skills, post-secondary studies. You know, how do they get there? Problem-solving skills, logical skills, communication, etc. And then the new one, the ICD2O, we're preparing them for a future in the digital technological world. And we're making them digital literate citizens. Because it's not just using the technology, understanding how it's being used. And for those that want to learn how to build it. So those transferable skills once again, because things are changing so fast. So just diving a little bit deeper into the actual strands themselves. Once again, you can see the three of them there. I won't go into this too much because we've already looked at this. You know, the whole understanding computers, computational thinking, there's definitely some, you know, carryover between them. Listen, we're professionals and we're experts in our field. You know, you can see how these strands are really based a lot on each other. And there is a fair bit of similarity. At least that's what I noticed. I think with the ICD2O, though, there was a little bit more choice in how you could sort of gauge certain topics and look at them. So break it down into a picture. We have strand A, which was an overarching strand. We had strand B and strand C underneath it. So when we were putting this curriculum together, the idea was that you shouldn't teach strand A by itself, strand B by itself, and strand C by itself. That was not the goal. The goal was have this understanding of strand A, and then how can we bring strand B and strand C and integrate it? How can I use hardware and software and relate that to computational thinking and relate that to connections? How does my program actually use these things? And so while you were teaching the specific expectations, the goal was to try and weave and connect the expectation to the overarching strand, which was strand A. And you've all seen the pictures in the ministry documents. Now, I get it. Some teachers are going to teach each strand independently, and I'm sure that's the case. But once again, the essence when we were putting this together and what the ministry really wanted was that students were making connections between what they're learning about digital technology and programming and the application of this learning in different disciplines and industries, as well as in the skilled trades. In the ICD2O document, I think would get lost in this idea. And so I would say to students, okay, we're going to build a program, using loops. Could you use this program in your science class? Could you use this program or something like this in your art class? How are you using this technology or these concepts, or how can they be used in a different class, in a different field? What could you do for your society? What could you do for your school community? And that was really the overarching idea of making these connections. It's not just about programming for the sake of programming. It's not just about learning about hardware for the sake of learning about hardware. It's like, how is this being used in the world? How can I innovate and use this differently? And that's really what we wanted to do in this ICD2O, because it's not just about coders taking the course and programmers taking the course, it's about everybody taking the course and seeing how all of this could relate to them. So, taking a concept like the ethical use of AI, how can that apply to students? Not just in my course, but in their daily lives. How can they use ChatGPT so it's beneficial? Right. And once again, I go back to having to generate you test questions to prepare for your math class, having it come up with formula sheets for you. Right. These are all wonderful ways of using the technology to do something different in a different field. I know a lot of scientists, use programming. Why? For data aggregation, right? And so you wouldn't think that scientists would have to take a programming course, but it's actually quite handy if they know how to use a Python program, to have it scour a bunch of data and then turn it into a graph. Once again, a different way of using the technology. So we can get a lot of crossover between strands A with B and C. And at times it was challenging, I have to admit. Working with strand B, I often found that parts of it would overlap with strand C as well. So in essence, the idea of this curriculum was to show the interplay, the importance of having well-rounded and inclusive feel between the materials. Once again, hoping to get my students to connect, of course, to what they experience in their lives, what's affecting them, and especially the non-CS kids. Now, Peter did an amazing job here, making it look pretty with the colors and whatnot. So here's the strand structure done in a beautiful artistic point of view. And once again, it's all coming back to how can we tie these strands together? How do we get this overarching aspect to wire in, so that we can make things relevant and meaningful? Because if the students don't find it important, they're not going to be engaged. If they're not going to be engaged, then we really haven't been able to do what we need to do. And of course, we get them engaged and we get them excited, then we can maximize their learning, right? And as teachers, that's what we want to do. We want to trick them into like understanding that, oh, this is really cool, and then like have them run with it. So, rubber meeting the road time, right? What does computational thinking, planning, purpose look like? So I taught this point by introducing the concept of computational thinking first and explaining its relevance, in problem solving and programming. I then would ask my students, how do you plan out your program? What's it going to look like? What's the plan to solve this? What algorithm, are you going to use? What's it going to look like? And so by doing this, students were understanding that, oh my goodness, if I actually plan stuff out, things actually work out better, right? And so that was definitely that whole focus on planning and thinking first, instead of just running in and doing it. In terms of digital technology and society, once again, this was one of the easier parts that I found as a teacher bringing this in, because you just expose students, right, to what's going on, what's in their lives, the different types of technology that are out there. A bit more of the challenge was sort of understanding this impact on society, right, or even in their lives, how things are being used. So you take something like the ability for your doctor to recognize, what's going on with your blood sugars. And so that's great. So now your doctor has access to, personal health data information. And that's wonderful, I think, between the person and the doctor. What was to happen if an insurance company gets that? Should they have that information? What if they're not going to use it to change, your insurance premium? So what if they do? Right? So these sort of topics, these sort of ideas, bringing in that ethical aspect, making connections and saying, yeah, it's great that my doctor knows what's going on with my blood sugar, but what happens if someone intercepts the signal? What if someone hacks the information and gets at it? Right? And we've had that. We hear about data breaches. We hear about cybersecurity issues. Now, applications, careers, and connections, what I did best here was to try and focus on my course, right? My main reason was how can we integrate and get connected to technology? How is that done in the students' lives? So we're trying to connect what they're learning in class to other classes they took. And I know that was something that I really tried to do, was saying, okay, what you're learning here, can you use it someplace else? Can you get more value from it? And then highlighting the interdisciplinary nature of digital technology. So programming and digital skills, they're not just relevant in computer science, but they're used in the healthcare field. They're used in financing, engineering, and art. Providing examples to help students understand the diverse applications of digital technology and how they're used in various industries. Once again, just tying stuff into that and saying, okay, this is great, but. So that's how I did a lot of this. Your hardware, like I said, I was lucky. I'm an computer engineering teacher, so I had access to a lot of hardware. So, first of all, you teach students the parts of a computer and how they work, because it's sort of important, and then just, hey, let's take it apart. Let's reverse engineer it. Let's have some fun with it. Let's see if we can build some components. Let's get something that's broken and see if we can get it working. And just understanding why is the architecture the way it is. So that was great, and a lot of students enjoyed that. Of course, encouraging students to investigate the importance of data and connectivity. Right, I would talk often about the loss of the internet access when Rogers went down. How did that affect people? How did it affect them? Right, when we were having our COVID challenges, what happened when Rogers was overloaded? You couldn't join a meeting or whatnot because things are, or you had 5 people in the house all trying to do a Google Meet at once and just killed the bandwidth, right? So we would talk about these things and explain them and go through them. And then for the cybersecurity and data aspect, once again, like I said, I used that Cisco Systems or online Cisco Skills for All website. And the class really enjoyed it. They actually did the module. They were able to work on their own things. They had their own little quizzes and tests in it. The students were able to work at their own pace. And at the end of it all, they learned more about cybersecurity and data safety than I could teach them. And at the end, they actually had a certificate that they could print out or put into on their resume or part of their portfolio. And then, of course, examining your innovations of digital technology, we looked at AI. How's it affecting our daily lives? What will it do in the future? Are we going to have like a Terminator franchise going on, right? Now, of course, when we're doing this, being selective about the articles you grab, trying to make sure that you're getting both sides of it, right? As teachers, we want to, not indoctrinate, we want to educate. It's very important that we're educating them, right? Giving them all the tools, all of the avenues, helping them recognize them. So all of this was all things that we looked at and chatted. Of course, strands here, programming. So the assumption, of course, was that your students should have a little bit of programming experience or access. I never counted on it. Talked to a lot of my math teachers when it comes to teaching that part or those strands and their challenges. I could only imagine at elementary what some of those challenges are as well. Now, I chose Python for my language for this course, and I saw that most of you, when we did the Flash waterfall aspect there, did the same thing. Now, in terms of what did I cover, I did basic output, basic input, loops and variables, sort of, because Python's not tightly typed, but I'm not going to get into that. It's one of the challenges I don't like about it. If statements, and then we did some functions. So we didn't go in depth any more than that. It was enough for the students to have an understanding about the fundamentals of programming and still be able to produce something cool. And then, of course, in terms of assessment and evaluation, lots of scaffolding examples, because you were going to have those students that aren't, necessarily CS kids and aren't going to stay up all night coding because that's not their style. So having that scaffolding there, helping them, giving them skeleton parts of the program to fill in, going through that, going back to the planning, coming up with the proper algorithm. And then, using proper variable names, proper indenting techniques, proper commenting. All of these skills are very important, and they help the students become better programmers. And in terms of the modularity and the modification, of course, that sort of came in with the functions. And once again, how did I relate this to the other stuff? It's like, okay, could you build something for your other course? Could you, build something for your team? Right? How about your mom or dad? If they have a business, is there some way you could build a little app for them to do something? Create a quiz program to help your friends pass their driving test or pass their science class or memorize the, periodic table. And so, doing this, it worked. And the functions, of course, it's not too hard for students to understand if you've laid everything out for them. And just the whole idea of being able to reuse their program and changing things on the fly that they would need to do. So it worked out well. And I think the students really enjoyed it. So what were some considerations for program planning? So these notes were courtesy of a fellow educator that I work with. So we know that teachers have to take into account students' diverse learning profiles, right? How do we do that? We have to design tasks that offer individual choice. They have to be relevant and they have to be authentic. If we're doing that, this will actually give students the graduated levels of challenge. Because not everyone in that class is going to want the level 4, be at that level 4. But you can have a level 2 or a level 3 student and still be very successful. So we have to recognize that. Right? So we could represent concepts and information in multiple ways, help students become resourceful and knowledgeable learners. We did this by using a variety of media to ensure that students were provided with alternatives, auditory learning, visual learning, not just coding. And of course, that allowed me to support my learners as best as I could, right? And then I could focus and strategize and work with the students that needed more help. You get a really good student working with a student who's not doing so well. That pair programming aspect is great for them. Helps them learn a lot of different skills. And it also gives the students a chance to, work with someone differently. So we talk about universal design for learning, right? What does this do? It provides equitable access to computer studies curriculum by recognizing that students are diverse, right? And we have to design for that aspect. We have to have those different modalities. We talk about DI, so your differentiated instruction. These are using specific skills and the learning needs of students, based on what works for them. Some students work great one-on-one, some work great in pairs. Having group programming is nice, but at the end of the day, kids still have to be able to program, right? So group work doesn't always work. And then when it came to actually designing programming and assignments and tasks, using the idea of universal design, recognizing that I had a whole bunch of different types of learners in my class, I really wanted to have like a floor and a ceiling range so that the students could fit anywhere in between the floor and the ceiling range. So students are provided with the opportunity to find their own entry point. So, I had a CPT that had 4 or 5 different levels that they could attack. This is the base one. If you add this, it takes you here. If you add that, it takes you there, right? And that was great. So students were able to sort of figure out where they wanted to enter and go as far as they wanted to. It let them work on their own pace, and it allowed us to offer support and for other students to help them. And yet it allowed the student to move forward, right? So having those tasks and designing those tasks intentionally with the different levels where they can come in, which is something I've sort of done in the past, but I really focused on this year in this course just because of the clientele that I had. It was great. And overall, it worked out very well. We actually ran the course. Normally, I do my CPT at the end, so it would run in January. But what I did was I ran most of the course, and then we started programming in about October, late October. And then by Christmas, the students had actually finished their programming assignment, which was their major CPT. And then in the new year, we looked at some of those other soft skills, the AI, some of the other aspects, which was nice because it gave students the chance to use those programming skills and then see how they could tie it into other places. And then in the new year, when all the other students were getting hit with their final projects and prepping for exams for their other courses, we were doing topics that were much lighter. So kids were doing single assignments in class, discussions and stuff. So then they weren't as stressed out. And I think it worked out really, really well. It was nice for me because I wasn't marking everything at the last minute as well. And that was once again using this type of approach. So some other approaches that I found out worked really well, hands-on. If you can get the students doing hands-on stuff, it's great. They enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, coders will always love to code, but that's not always the clientele that you would get in this course. So you really need to be able to connect those students so that they can see the world differently. And for me, that was hard. It was a real big challenge, always teaching new level computer science courses, trying to relate to those students that didn't fall into that category, for lack of a better word, was a challenge. So how do you connect your students to what you're teaching? And, what are their interests? What are their future goals? How can technology, this digital technology, be a part of it? Right? So by connecting topics and challenges that were relevant to the students and their lives, it engaged them. How many people use a phone or a device to eat at a restaurant? You go for an all-you-can-eat sushi, which I do a fair bit of, it's all ordered on an iPad. It wasn't like that 10 years ago. Why have people gone to that route? And students don't think about this, that, 10 years ago, even when people order, you go to a McDonald's now, they have a kiosk. Right? Most students, you don't see people like me going to the kiosk. I go to the person and order at the counter. But like my kids, they go to the kiosk. They don't even consider the counter. So, why is it like this? Why is this happening? And that's a great way to relate that, because the kids get it, because they're eating at McDonald's and they're using the kiosk. Right? And then you talk to them, but what about a job? Don't you want a part-time job? Yeah, you need money? Okay. So if everyone uses the kiosk, there's no one standing behind the counter. They're like, oh, it's like, yeah, aha, right? So this connection for the students to relate to. Scaffolding activities and projects, making low floor, high ceiling places where students can enter on their own and achieve the success that they want. So, not having one big program, for example, have different parts, have them code different things. And a little bit of this, a little bit of that, bring it together. And, having that level of assignment. So I used to be horrible because I would always think, well, it's all about the final CPT. It's got to be a video game or it's got to be something. And then I realized the kids that aren't great at programming, they're dying in my course. And then I realized, well, what if I put in a reflection piece? What if I put in some artistic pieces for those students? So that, if they're okay programmers with this artistic piece, they can still feel successful and do well. And, it worked out really, really well. Now, like I said, group work is wonderful, but I still feel that students have to be able to program on their own. So having that individual, assignments, and okay, how do we prevent them from cheating? That's a challenge. But you know what? If you've been teaching long enough, you can sort of figure it out. So I had students, in their Python programs using 2D arrays. And I'm like, we just covered if statements. If you're jumping to 2D arrays, where they were using lists or something, and I'm like, Mr. Ceccato didn't teach you this. Where did you get this from? Right? And then it comes out. So, being on the lookout for cheating and then just saying to students, hey, listen, it's not necessarily always about getting the marks. It's about understanding what you're doing, learning, being better. And then the final thing that I really did that I thought was great was encouraging students to share or demonstrate their work. Kids would write a piece of software and then have their friends play the game, right? Or they'd show it to their parents, or I'd bring in my administrators and have them see what the kids were doing, right? They love to show off what they're doing. They love to express themselves. And it's so positive for them, to have an administrator come in behind Jimmy and it's like, wow, Jimmy or Susie, this is fabulous, right? And the kids feel good about that and they're showing what you're doing. So, that really played a big role. And I even do it with my engineering class as well, just showing them what we're building, etc. So that kids get a feel for what is this course about. And remember, we're elective courses, so we have to constantly sell. right? And we don't stop, we're not getting out of a course next year. So a few more considerations, and this was pretty much out of the ministry document. They like the central focus was learning related to innovations and emerging technologies, your social, your cultural, your economic, environmental, and ethical issues. So this is aspects of what's positive, what's negative, and just exposing them to it, right? Letting them recognize that there's so much digital technology in the world. It's not going away, and we're going to have to deal with it. So how can we utilize it in an effective way? And looking at those moral and ethical questions, those hard questions, that we're trying to figure out as a society. Just on the ACE listserv, there was a talk like, how do we stop cell phone use in class? And a couple student teachers were like, well, I do this or I do that, or other schools were like, well, we have a no phones at school policy, right? And so these are all aspects of digital technology. Yes, that phone is wonderful, but if your kids are on it all the time and they're not really engaged in class or learning, well, that's a negative issue. Of course, we also wanted, and the ministry definitely wanted students to, how did, contributions and innovations in digital technology from diverse backgrounds, both local and global communities, how can we recognize them? Not everything is built in Silicon Valley, right? Google is actually out of Toronto, or they used to be at least. So, what are these people contributing to us? And so looking at that and recognizing that, there's a lot of things going on, biases as well. And how are AI languages being taught? What would happen if we only pointed them at a certain repertoire of information? So I did find this fairly challenging because, there wasn't a lot of resources out there for this aspect. We always talked about, Anna being the first female programmer, and we talk about Grace Hopper, and we talk about Alan Turing, but, beyond that, what more? And there is a lot more out there, but I'm hoping that as time goes on and more teachers start to develop material, we'll get more of these contributions and more of these innovations from people from the diverse local and global communities that we can bring into the curriculum and discuss and talk about. Of course, the whole skilled trade aspect is very important. And then financial literacy, right? Financial literacy, this is education that provides students with the preparation they need to make informed decisions in a complex and fast-changing world, right? There was a lot of opportunities to teach this in the course for me. So, one thing I would often do is when we were doing loops, it's like using the repetition with a formula to like, okay, you need to make X amount of dollars at a certain interest rate. How long is it going to take you to do that? Future interest, future value. And this tied into their math classes, right? So you could take some of the concepts they were learning in math and bring them into the programming sphere and talk about it. One of the programs I've always done was like, how are mortgages calculated? How does a principal work? What is a principal? And what's an interest rate? And so you discuss this. It's all financial literacy. It's all showing students at the end of the month, this is how much money your mortgage costs. And this is why it's going to take you 30 years to pay it off, right? And why people feel they can't afford a house anymore. So lots of ways to tie that in terms of variables, in terms of, repetition and loops. And then just even talking about, how about building your own computer? If you had a budget, how would you do it? What would you spend it on? So these are great ways. And once again, of course, just explaining the terminology so that students understand what the words are, maybe going through the formulas so that they understand them and they can use them properly, was a great way of bringing all this in. All right, time for everyone's favorite, assessment and evaluation. A&E. Ladies and gentlemen, you are the professionals. Okay, we have our professional judgment. So I encourage you to use many different ways to assess and evaluate your students because they're in front of you and you know what your clientele is, and hopefully, you know, you have an idea of how you can best suit them. So that was the key. Get some diagnostics to sort of figure out your clientele, and then, you know, do what works for them. With such a varied curriculum, really, there's so many different ways that you can use assessment and evaluation, especially with some of the more open concepts. You know, and it's going to help them gauge their understanding. I do know that some school boards have like a growing success or an assessment and evaluation document. So you can use that as well if that's more your cup of tea. But for me, I wanted to be fun. I wanted to be creative. You know, so we did weird stuff like paired programming, online tracing of programs. There's some great websites that, you know, you can put in the variables and it'll actually show them in runtime. You know, infographics, presentations, music, or art as assessment tools. Right? Why not have them play a song, you know, in their program? Have them explain something using a presentation. And then, you know, debates and stuff, these were things that we never really used to have in our CS courses unless you were just doing the ethics side of things. But, you know, we can have debates about programming languages, right? Discussions, group work, peer reviews, peer code reviews, right? Give your code to your friend, see if they understand it, right? What could you do better? How can they learn? You know, these are all great ways of assessing my students, evaluating them, and giving them choice, right? Because once again, my clientele was very different. You know, with this new ICD, we're getting a lot of different students, which is great. And I want to keep them moving forward if I can. Now, our good old knowledge, understanding, thinking, application, and communication. So, for those of you who might be wondering, what does knowledge and understanding look like in ICD2O? So, personally, if I needed to assess this, I'm going to be going with subject-specific content that's acquired in the course, which of course is your knowledge, and the comprehension of its meaning and significance, which is the understanding. So these are your definitions, your concepts, your main ideas. You know, that's how I would assess the K and U. Anybody else doing something differently? Anybody out there in the have how they assess knowledge and understanding? It's like crickets. Just like teaching online and code again, it's all I see are faces, little dots of green and orange. In terms of thinking, so this is the use of critical and creative thinking skills or processes. We see this in algorithm design. I see this in problem solving. I see this in the solutions the students come up with when they're programming. You know, although the solutions can sometimes fall under the application side of things. So once again, when I was doing thinking, that's what I was looking at. What are their skills? What are the processes? What does their algorithm look like? Does it make sense, etc.? Communication, so is conveying the meaning through various forms, showing how to solve a problem, an algorithm in several forms, using text, using pictorially, having the students act out a bubble sort, watching the bubble sort video of the Hungarian dancers doing the Hungarian bubble sort dance. These are all ways of students being able to communicate what they're learning. And of course, you know, how they express and how they decode what the problem is. And there's lots of ways for them to show this to you. And then of course, application, well, does the program work? You know, is it doing what it's supposed to do? Did they actually build something that solved the problem? You know, was there some different contexts that they looked at? So those were the ways that I assessed it. when I was looking at those 4 strands, although I did get, into some of the more creative ways of students expressing it. Now, here we go. There we go. This one might be for those that really need to see A&E from the ministry. So, if you want actual curriculum concepts and how they related to the categories, here's one possible option. Once again, this is just a guide. And personally, I suggest the best way to address A&E challenges is for you to use your experience and professional judgment. So for knowledge and understanding, anything that fell under computational thinking and programming concepts and the actual practice of it. That's one possible way of looking at KU. For your thinking, identifying and analyzing, carrying out the plan, your problem solving, using research to come up with things, how to inquiry what's going on. Another way of doing it. In terms of communication, interviews, presentations, good old flow charts. I love pseudocode and IPO charts, programming language syntax, coding standards. Right, I'm a very big stickler on formatting your code with comments and proper indentation. Although in Python that goes out the window. Really using indenting for actual brace control is crazy. Just give me my old brace brackets, please. But good old Java, can't go wrong with Java. Love it. And then of course, your application. So these are your computational thinking concepts, programming concepts and strategies. How are they connecting to social, cultural, economic, environmental, and ethical issues? These are all things that you can look at if you wanted to assess under the application strands. So I think it does a pretty good job. But once again, sort of a ministry guide, and we're professionals, so we can get and use what we need to do. Okay, finally, educator supports and resources, the good stuff. So at the top of the slide, you have some generic points from the ministry, which you may find useful, depending on the type of stakeholder you are. So if you were to Google, the expectation document, the key changes document, there's an actual link there. Parents guide, there's one that exists for the ICD2O that you could Google and it'll all be there. Now, I had some amazing peers of mine in ACE that have used these 2 websites that they found very useful for the computer courses. So the first one was criticallyconsciouscomputing.org, and that looked at a lot of the biases and some of those challenging, different ideas. Great course if you're looking for something or need some clarification. There was a few people that actually put, hey, Mr. AI Chat, if I was to teach this course, what would it look like? So there's a whole entire ICD2O unit plan that was put together by Bing Chat. I'm not sure if Peter did that or it was Sal who did it, or a mix of both. It actually came out pretty good. We were talking about this on the ACE email discussion list. It wasn't, I have to admit, definitely something that you can look at. However, I think the good stuff's on the next slide. So once again, you can check these out, you can use them, but for me, the good stuff's on the next slide. So the first one, and this is that collaborative document that I was talking about. This was started as a communal resource at the Summer Institute CEMC. CEMC, for those of you that have maybe never heard of them, is run out of the University of Waterloo. They're for the Center for Education of Mathematics and Computing. They do some amazing work for CS teachers and CE teachers. So they do a summer conference. If you're looking for lessons, resources that are fully created, the CEMC site, which we're going to talk about down here, is definitely the way to go. Now, this Google Doc, okay. So want to open that. Oh, I might not be able to here. Yes.
I dropped the link in the chat.
Thank you, Peter. So if I go here and there at the bottom, all right, communal resource. If I click on it, it's going to let me go. Yes. So once again, put together at the CEMC. First 2 pages, got a bit of overview and whatnot, purpose, course strands. The good stuff starts down here on page 4. So if you wanted to take a look at, sorry?
We're not seeing, do you have it on another screen?
Oh, yes, I do. Okay, can I share this screen? No, my editor resources. Let's see if I can get this screen to share.
I have to stop presenting.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to do that. Okay, so stop the share and then reshare. This one. This one. There we go. Thank you. Better?
It's there.
Yeah. So if you wanted to teach the computational thinking skills and practices, these are some ideas and some videos. So this is once again put together by teachers for teachers. You know, if you weren't sure what decomposition is, so this site, or sorry, this living document is great because there's lots of links that other teachers have used or have found very useful when teaching the ICD2O. And you can see here, we have lectures, you know, Carol the robot if you were doing debugging, and it was all broken down into streams. So once again, this just came together at the Summer Institute CEMC that was put together last summer. So once again, feel free to use this, access this. Hopefully it'll be very useful for you and be beneficial. Now I'm going to jump to, I'm hoping CEMC will open up. Can we see that one? Do we see the CEMC site?
We can.
Okay, perfect. Now, for those of you that are, what am I going to do tomorrow because I can't go to school because I'm not feeling well? The CEMC basically has every teacher who comes to the conference submit one resource. So this is amazing. You click on the drop-down box, you can see these are all the different courses of actual resources that exist. And we have ICD2O. If I click on that and I go down, and you can specify, but I'm just going to hit search. And as you can see here, we have 12 resources found, all of them from 2023, and these are all projects, assignment, lesson plans, curriculum unit on Python and Lego robotics, you know, making your own random number generator. All done for teachers, by teachers, completely free for you to use. And it's just amazing what's on here. And like I said, that was just a generic search. So you can refine it and you can go back to it. But this website, you know, has really saved me in the past. And I've been attending the CEMC conference. It was always my vacation. That's how I would sell it to my wife and kids, was that this was Dad's vacation. It's in the middle of August, beginning to middle of August. It's 4 days. They put you up in res, and it's just fabulous. Everything's taken care of for you. But just amazing resources there that you can access. So please definitely check them out. Definitely wonderful. The links are there, and I hope that you get as much from it as I have in the past, because it is absolutely wonderful, all the different things that they've had and they've offered. So once again, great sites. Please check them out. And I'm almost done here. So a few people I need to thank you. Christina Mazio, who's the coordinator of secondary programs at York Catholic District School Board. worked with me when we were putting some of this presentation together. Peter, who's been our moderator and has been working with me on this for the last few weeks. Grant Hutchinson, big shout out to Grant, who helped me and made sure that I had permission from the ministry to say what I did and not get us in trouble. Of course, to my brothers and sisters that were on the ICD2O writing team, you know who you are. You are all amazing. I have a lot of amazing fellow teachers at York Catholic that I'm blessed to work with, so I want to thank them. And of course, to my ACE executive team. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. So a big shout out to all of you. Thank you very much.
Okay, first, obviously, we have to thank Rob. This was amazing. There were so many comments in there about how people plan on using this. There was even one request that came in to ask if you could go into their classroom to help. It's amazing. The one really important thing that I get out of the new course is that integration is the key. You know, a lot of the content is very similar, of course, but integration is the key, trying to integrate the three strands. So anyway, in the next few days, everybody's going to receive an evaluation form link. I have dropped it in the chat already. If you haven't had a chance to click on that, then you'll get it in the email. I will be compiling all the notes from the chat. Many resources were shared in there. It's been really excellent. And then, of course, there's going to be a link to the archive video over on the OTF YouTube channel. Let me just drop some links in to the chat. And actually, I'll drop the link into the evaluation form again. So if you could, maybe just go ahead and click on that link so you've got it open in another tab. So that way, when we're done, you can go ahead and fill that in. And lastly, I want to mention that our next OTF Connects webinar will be next Thursday, investigating real-world social, economic, and environmental issues through the climate change challenges. Educators exploring the opportunities, the sustainable development goals. The SDGs, Dr. Susan Elliott, she presented on this about a week ago, and LSF has up to $500 grants for schools to integrate the SDGs into their class. And this would actually be a very interesting opportunity for some people that want to have a look at that.